Diversity in policing. Nine Investigates crunched the numbers and found it is a problem for nearly all of our sheriff's offices and major police departments across Central Florida, particularly when it comes to hiring black officers.
Investigative reporter Carla Ray looked into why recruiting efforts have not been enough to bridge the divide between law enforcement and the black community.
As a high school cross-country athlete, a then-teenaged Fred Jones says he was stopped by police on mile 6 of an 8-mile run.
17 years old. And they said I fit the description of someone who had broken into a lady's house. And so they put me in the back seat. They took me to her house, and they brought this elderly lady out. And I thought, I'm about to go to prison for stuff that I didn't do.
Now one of the most public faces of the Lake County Sheriff's Office, Sergeant Jones's first experience with law enforcement was like that of so many other black men and teens.
I cried that whole way home. I was angry, and so ever since then, you know, that time when I see cops, I will go the other way. But I understand now why some people are fearful. You know, they were not mean to me. You know, they were not, it wasn't excessive force. I think it was a lack of empathy that they didn't have at that time. And so I had an image of law enforcement up till I became one.
Despite a push to increase diversity in the agency, fewer than 4% of the county's sworn deputies are black, compared to 11% of the population. The number of sworn Hispanic deputies is higher at 7%, but still below the approximately 17% of county residents who identify as Hispanic.
If you look at the history of law enforcement and the black community, it's not a pretty one. You know, if you go back as far as the civil rights time and you know, cops were used to enforce Jim Crow laws.
The disparities exist in nearly every county. In Seminole, just under 10% of deputies are black compared to 13% of the population. 11% are Hispanic compared to 22% of the population. The gap is wider in Osceola, where more than half the population is Hispanic, but only about a third of sworn deputies are. And only 4% of deputies there are black compared to 14% of the population.
Going back decades, there has been mistrust between the African-American community and law enforcement.
Our largest, best-paying sheriff's office doesn't match the community either.
So it's something that we work really hard at.
Sheriff John Mina says more than half of the hires he's made have been minorities, but black deputies still make up less than 14% of the agency compared to 22% of the county's population. And though about a third of the population is Hispanic, just more than 1 in 4 deputies is.
I'm recruiting all the time. That's why I'm doing this interview with you, because I want specifically our African-American community, our Hispanic community to know that I want to be a diverse agency.
Research shows wanting a diverse agency is likely not enough to bridge the cultural divide with the black community. A 2016 Pew Research survey found only about a third of black adults said police did an excellent or good job when it comes to use of force, treating racial and ethnic groups equally, and holding officers accountable for misconduct.
And if you think about that, it's like throwing a pebble into a lake. That ripple effect keeps going until you do something to change it.
Brevard County's makeup most closely reflects its community, with 13% of its sworn deputies being black compared to 11% of the population, and 11% of its deputies being Hispanic, which is right in line with the population. The agencies we spoke with say they're recruiting at community events, historically black colleges and universities, and even through school resource deputies in high schools. They hope the numbers continue to shift over the next few years. In studio, Carla Ray, Channel 9 Eyewitness News.